So this was an interesting video collab idea presented to me by my friend Emperor Kumquat. Since we are both trans people, he thought it would be a good idea for Pride Month if we both take a look at the first transgender character in Transformers fiction, or at least the first one that I can think of, IDW's Arcee, in her premiere Spotlight issue. Let's go over the story summary first. We begin with Arcee, who has apparently left a trail of carnage in her wake as she tries to hunt down Jhaxus. She is eventually captured by Ultra Magnus, basically a big, by-the-book super cop in this universe. She is removed from her body and her spark is imprisoned by Fortress Maximus. Sometime later, the same prison where she is held is attacked by some Decepticons looking to get their hands on Monstructor, the first combiner in the IDW universe, who is also being processed at this same prison. With no other option, Fortress Maximus reinstalls Arcee's spark and reconstructs her body, so that she may help defend the prison from the Decepticons. Well, despite their best efforts, the Decepticons get away with the new combiner team. Jetfire asks Arcee what the deal is with her and Jhaxus, and she explains their sordid backstory together. And the issue ends with Jetfire convincing Fort Max to let Arcee go, and she renews her hunt for Jhaxus and his creations. That's the basic summary, but what I glossed over were all the trans elements of this story. Now, I'm going to go over the parts of the comic that I saw as trans. Obviously, these are my interpretations and not necessarily something intended by the writer, so take these with a grain of salt or whatever. When Arcee is floating in her spark prison, I think this could be seen as how a lot of trans people, especially those closeted and before they transition, feel separated from their body. Or so, a lot of trans people in this situation try to escape their gender dysphoria by engaging in activities that would help remove them from their own body. This could be more innocent things like watching TV and playing video games, to more dangerous and harmful things like drug use. Basically, anything that lets you take a break and not feel trapped in your own body for a while. I'd also propose that Arcee, being a floating spark, could also be her identifying as non-binary in this moment. I mean, without a body, you're without gender, right? Maybe this is Arcee's preferred identity, at least at this time. She does say that she finally feels at peace, so maybe this is her preferred existence rather than being stuck in her body. Obviously, later on, she would be comfortable identifying as female and even as transgender, but that's a discussion for another time. When she is reinstalled into her body, she describes her existence as hell, which indeed, for many trans people, especially those struggling with gender dysphoria, existence is hell. Fortress Maximus comments how normally reintegrating a spark with its body causes severe disorientation, but Arcee is totally fine, saying that she's impressive, a real piece of work. This too I can see relate to the trans experience. As a trans person, you already feel disoriented from your own body, so I can see how this reintegration process she's undergoing wouldn't really faze Arcee if she already rejects the body she has to begin with. More so, if a real human were to experience what Arcee is right now, being removed from their body, and then being put back together in front of them, surely they would be traumatized. Speaking of RoboCop for a moment, I could see how that series might similarly have some trans elements to it.
I believe that Murphy's case was unusual, but not unique. We can find someone else, someone to whom the prospect might even be desirable.
I've never met anyone who wanted to be a robot.
A lot of trans people struggle with their gender dysphoria to the point where they don't care what happens to their body. I know I didn't. And for a long time, I really didn't take care of myself because of it. There were even some points where I didn't care if I died tomorrow. Obviously, I'm much better and happier now, and eagerly look forward to the future. But this is still something that a lot of trans people deal with. And I will say that when Arcee feels like she was discarded by Jhaxus, that's a bit trans too, as sometimes when trans people come out, they are disowned or abandoned by their friends and family. The maelstrom of contradictory sensory inputs that she describes could be this comic's version of gender dysphoria, which, as I covered, is something that every trans person struggles with, especially prior to beginning your transition. I'd also like to think of Jetfire as being an ally. He genuinely seems to be concerned and supportive of Arcee. much in the same way that my friends have been supportive of me during my transition. Curious enough to ask questions and make sure I'm doing okay, but not wanting to accidentally offend me at the same time. Maybe it's just because I'm a big Jetfire fangirl, but yeah, in my eyes, he's a trans ally. Unfortunately, it's the latter part of this comic where the trans allegory kind of falls apart. The biggest issue that people have with this comic is how, at least by itself, this is a story about how a male robot was forcibly feminized into a female robot against their will, and how by making one member of a species female, it therefore makes the rest of the species male by default, as if being male is the default and being female is abnormal, which is obviously ridiculous and very offensive to females. In fact, it's actually the opposite in nature because all mammalian embryos start off as female. In humans, the baby doesn't begin developing male characteristics until after the first month in the womb. But biology aside, I don't want to get off on a tangent. You can look up that stuff on your own. The other major problem people have with this comic is how it portrays trans people as being crazy. Personally, I don't think Arcee is being crazy in this story. She's just really, really angry and kind of a badass. Which, honestly, every trans woman, or trans people in general, have a right to be. We are an oppressed minority in a world that hates and fears us just for being who we are. So, you go, sister. You make that sparkless son of a glitch pay. But depictions of trans people, especially trans women, as being insane has been a major issue in pop culture. A lot of early representation of trans people in media were often very negative and problematic, often being portrayed as psychotic killers at worst, or at best, the trans identity was played for laughs, usually as a disguise or gotcha gag. Thankfully, in recent years, we've started to get more trans representation that was a bit more positive. But obviously, there's still a long way to go until we see trans characters and actors in movies and TV shows who are more than just their gender identity. But enough about generalities. Let's explore some of the specific moments in this comic that don't really work in favor of the trans narrative. When Arcee explains her history with Jaaxis, she basically states that, at least in the IDW universe, she is the first female transformer. That Jaaxis experimented on her, tampered with her cyber DNA, her robo-chromosomes, whatever sci-fi technobabble, essentially forcibly feminizing her into the fembot that she is today. This is problematic for multiple reasons. First of all, female transformers will and do already exist outside of Arcee in IDW and this Spotlight issue. As we'll learn later, the original 13 exist in the IDW universe, with Solus Prime, the first female Cybertronian, being among them. Not only that, but there are numerous Transformer colony worlds out there where female Transformers exist, in some cases even outnumbering the male ones. This isn't even the first appearance of a female Transformer in IDW, as stories like Megatron Origin did include female Transformers several months before this issue was released. Second, Arcee's mention of pronouns, how with all other Transformers it's he, but with her it's she, it doesn't really make much sense when you think about it. We only use he and she because we're speaking English, when other languages do have non-gendered pronouns. And we only see the Transformers as having gender because we are humans, living on Earth, where a lot of the life forms that we interact with on a daily basis do fall into some kind of biological binary of male and female. But these are alien robots. As far as we know, they don't have gender. At least not like we do, despite what some fan art online may lead you to believe. And they certainly don't speak English, so they would probably use some kind of non-gendered pronoun. Yes, maybe after dealing with other alien species with gendered pronouns, the Transformers might gravitate towards using one of them when in the company of these aliens. But Arcee specifically says that they use he/him pronouns when amongst themselves, which is preposterous. Why would they use gendered pronouns when they themselves have no gender? And how does changing Arcee's body or CNA or whatever introduce gender to their species. If she's a girl, that automatically makes all the other Transformers boys? No! That's not how it works. One person's gender identity does not affect everyone else's. And of course, we know that there are plenty of Transformers out there who defy gender norms. We've got big beefy ladies and little twig boys. So I don't think there's really anything that Jhaxus could have done to Arcee's body to make her more feminine than her just being herself. But touching on the pronoun thing again, it really just feels kind of forced and backwards. Like she's being misgendered by calling her she, which doesn't really make sense for the reasons that I've already brought up. It's kind of confusing because in this comic, it makes it seem like Arcee didn't want to transition, she didn't want to be female, she still identifies as male, but it will be retconned in the future that she did want to become female, and she is happy identifying as a fembot. So yeah, it's really weird that it seems like they're misgendering her even though they're using the correct pronouns. This story was written by Simon Furman, an acclaimed Transformers comic book writer dating back to the original Marvel Comics. And honestly, he's a great writer in his own right. He's written many highly praised stories in Transformers. But unfortunately, this is not one of them. Simon Furman is a cis straight man, at least as far as I know. So telling a story about a transgender robot may not have been within his wheelhouse. However, Mr. Furman states that he does not see Transformers as having gender, nor is this issue about Arcee's gender being changed, despite how many readers may interpret it that way. Simon Furman actually wrote another heavily gendered origin story for Arcee in the original UK Marvel comic books, but that's a story to be reviewed another time. As I mentioned earlier, this comic would later get retconned multiple times. First of which, focusing on the fact that Jhaxus experimented on and abandoned her, being the real reason why Arcee is so angry with him, not so much that he force-feminized her. It has since been stated that ancient Cybertron did have female Transformers, but they all disappeared for one reason or another, and Jhaxus' experiments weren't so much to introduce gender to the Cybertronian race, but more to restore an aspect of it that had been lost. It was also retconned that Arcee actually consented to Jhaxus' experiments on her, that she sought to change her gender, and it wasn't something that Jhaxus forced on her. But it was the lack of his aftercare that was the cause of her anger. Overall, I think as a story taken at face value, it's alright. Arcee is treated as a badass bot, which, to Simon Furman's credit, he doesn't write Transformers with gender in mind. His female characters are just as competent and capable as any male characters in his books. The problem with this issue is when gender is introduced into the equation. While I applaud Mr. Furman for trying to tell his trans story, even though he claims he did not intend it to be one, I think he lacks the lived experience to tell it genuinely. Primus knows that we need more LGBTQ+ representation in Transformers and fiction in general, especially transgender representation in my opinion. But I think it needs to be told by someone who is familiar with those subjects firsthand in order to be authentic and not come across as offensive, even though that's clearly not what the intention was here. Honestly, all this comic needs are a few little tweaks here and there, and it would be perfect. I really think it's just Arcee's backstory with Jhaxus that's the issue with this issue. Hence why it's been retconned so much over the years. As a trans woman, I love Arcee. I mean, I already liked Arcee in the many different incarnations that weren't explicitly transgender. But I do love the fact that one of her variants is trans, and a lesbian too. It helps me feel represented, and that's something that everyone needs to feel, whether you're trans, or gay, or black, or whatever. It helps you be seen and acknowledged for who you are, and that your existence is valid. Well, I hope you enjoyed my look at Spotlight Arcee. I actually reviewed this issue years ago as part of my ill-fated Transformers Book Club series. I wonder how my opinion about this book has changed now that I'm out and trans. Maybe check out that video to find out. And like I mentioned at the start, this video is part of a collaboration with Emperor Kumquat, so be sure to check out his video about this comic as well. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and do all that other fun stuff. And I'll see you back here next time for another fun Transformers video.